It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. Thank you so much for being here. I cannot hardly even believe how much shit I've got going on right now. And of course, some of it is about this show, and you're going to love it. A little later on, we have an interview with Erin Arvedlund. She writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer and several other magazines as a financial writer, a financial investigator. And she also wrote a book a few years ago in 2009 about Bernie Madoff. And she's actually studied him and known about him long before he imploded. And the book was absolutely fantastic. Listened to the entire book just yesterday at double speed on Audible. I should get paid to promote Audible. I fucking love that shit. I tell people in jest that I pay people to read books to me because my reading skills aren't necessarily the best, and it would take me forever. And of course, I have attention issues. So an audiobook, I was actually out in the yard doing some yard work, listened to 2.5 hours of audiobook in an hour and 15 minutes. So that was really cool. But listen to the whole thing. Absolutely love it. We'll talk about all of that. Also going to talk some more in the Investing Skeptically segment today about tactical investing and the value of back-tested data. So we've got that. And I also have many emails I have to answer. One of them was about the place. Someone had their money in a place and they wanted to know if they could use ETFs to kind of do the Polaris plan instead of the index funds. Yes, you may use the ETFs. I don't know if Vanguard has an ETF for every single fund that I recommend, but I think it's pretty close. I think you can get into the ballpark. And, if you're off by a percentage or two, or even 4 or 5% from the model that I created and talked about, don't sweat it. It's fine tuning. And I probably after the new year will talk about some adjustments I'm making to international. So that's something to look forward to if you kind of follow my plan. But yes, you can use the ETFs. The reason I don't like them is because you can trade them within a day. So I don't want anyone to be tempted. This is not, what's the market doing today? What's the market doing today? What's it doing tomorrow? What did it do yesterday? I don't want you to look at that shit. I had someone who contacted me and said, okay, let's give your plan a try. And I haven't had one of these kind of conversations in a long time. And I said, no, investing in stocks is not something you try. It's something you do. And if you're not really ready to just do it, then don't do it. If you're scared and you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna put 100,000 in the stock market and see how it does over the next 12 months, you could lose a shitload of money. You could make a shitload of money, but you could lose a shitload of money. It really works best in the long run, slow and steady. Add more money, keep adding money and time. And so if you want to make money quick, which is, by the way, one of the things I'm going to talk about with Erin Arvedlund in our interview about how you can make money quick with somebody like Bernie Madoff and a local Philadelphia advisor who was selling, I guess, alternative investments. And we talk about a lot of buzzwords that I don't like. One is alternative investments. I'm not necessarily opposed to them, but it opens up the door to almost anything and everything. And you better know what the fuck you're doing before you invest in an alternative investment. Make sure you really understand it. If you don't understand it, that's cool. Don't invest in it. Don't give your money to somebody or something that you don't understand. It's a good way to get screwed. Other things, the ETF thing I was just talking about. Yes, you can use ETFs. I've also done segments in the past on Are ETFs more tax efficient or cheaper to use than mutual funds? In some cases, yes. But with the specific case with Vanguard index funds, they are essentially the same. There's not a material difference in costs or tax consequences if you're in a taxable account. I just like you not having the ability to trade in a day. So if you get a crazy idea or you get spooked and you log on, you can't just sell the ETF right now and get the money. It's a mutual fund, an index fund, and you sell it and you get the price at the end of the day. And since you don't know the price at the end of the day or the next day, depending on what time you sell it, that may be just the thing that keeps you from doing something you're going to regret later. Other questions, someone asked me about HSAs, health savings accounts. I have talked about them at length, I think, in the past. But in short, a health savings account is a very nice way for you to take part of your income and then put it in there and then pull it out and pay medical bills without ever having to pay income, or never having to pay income taxes on the money that you've been paid. So, it's worth 20, 25, 30% more, which is kind of cool. I generally don't like it as an investment vehicle. I would much prefer you max out your 401k or 403b, your IRAs, Roth IRAs, and do everything else that you can before you use the health savings account as an investment vehicle. Often the amount of money you can get in there is smaller, and the company managing it knows that, so they have fees because they can't make a whole lot of money on your $3,000 or $4,000 like they could on an account that has $1 million. And with rare exception, the health savings account is never going to get particularly big. The other thing that's a drag for the company overseeing the health savings account is you're putting money in probably every paycheck, and you're taking money out on a regular basis to pay bills. So there's a lot of transactional activity that they have to maintain and supervise and check on and all that stuff. So it drives up costs. So often health savings accounts are not a cost-efficient way to invest. But if you've maxed out everything else you can think of, it might not be horrible. Just, keep that lower on the list of things that you can do and places that you can invest. Couple other fun things. The solar panels on the house have been installed. And some people have asked for follow-up on that. It's not turned on yet. Hopefully in a day or two, we have the final inspection from the city and the final payment where I pay the second half basically of the bill for it to be installed. One little bit of buzzkill is we found busted drywall in the ceiling of our master closet. I don't know if they dropped something while they were working in the attic or they stepped off one of the joists up there and there's broken drywall. It's not a real big deal, but hopefully they're going to send a repair person to work on it. But the installation process was quick and easy. I didn't hardly do a thing. It's all hooked up. There's extra wires and boxes on the outside of the house. Looks pretty cool. And we'll see how that goes in once it's turned on. The other update, I had talked about the possibility of getting a new vehicle. And we have purchased a RAV4 Prime, a Toyota RAV4 Prime, and it is like our Prius Prime where it has an oversized battery pack so it can go some distance on electricity only, and then when that is used up, it goes over to becoming a highly efficient hybrid vehicle. And this is something that you could consider if you're not quite ready to go 100% electric. And for us, I have my Bolt EV still, which I adore, which is 100% electric, and now the RAV4 Prime to replace the Prius Prime. So we will probably be 90 to 95% on electricity. The RAV4 Prime does have, I think, 42 miles of range on electricity. And just the other day, my wife drove around and did 4 or 5 errands, drove something like 44, 45 miles, and only for the last 2 miles did the gasoline kick in and bring her home. And then, of course, it gets plugged in, and tomorrow, the next day, whatever, you'll have all that range again. But it also has the gasoline engine. So if we just got a crazy idea and there wasn't a coronavirus pandemic, we could just hop on the thing and go 600 miles. Which, by the way, we had to go almost 600 miles to get the thing. We bought it in the state of New York, because the United States government sucks and does not have a uniform policy on the encouragement of highly efficient battery-powered electric vehicles. And so some states have regulations and are encouraging auto manufacturers to build more of this type of car. Other states do not. And most of the Midwest, most of the country actually, is a state that does not require this. The 3 West Coast states and then a handful in New England are the ones, the Northeast. I've been corrected on that before. The Northeast, not necessarily just New England. They have rules to encourage auto manufacturers to have a certain percentage of their vehicles. So a state like New York gets a lot of these cars, but a state like Illinois doesn't. Now, your local dealership may get one here and there, but if 5 people want to buy it and you're number 6 on the list, it could literally be 2 years before you can buy one. We found one. My super secret tip, by the way, if you want to play this game, find out what the CARB states are, C-A-R-B. I think that's the California Air Resource Board, the CARB regulations, which many states have adopted. So you want to look for the CARB states. And California is getting plenty of these cars, or getting more of these cars, but they have way more users that want to get them. So I went to the Northeast and found a dealership in extreme western New York, just over the border from Pennsylvania, up by Erie, Lake Erie, and absolutely delightful experience, by the way. No ups, no extras, no bullshit. Just, I had to pay MSRP and a $25 tax from New York, and then, of course, the appropriate sales taxes and registration costs for the state of Illinois to get the car. But we drove over in a one-way rental in a Toyota Corolla. Wow, that was an experience. Very loud. You could feel every bump in the road. It's an economy car, and it felt like it. Drove 8+ hours to get over there and pick up the car, and then to allow the vehicle some break-in, we took side roads halfway back, and then got on Route 30 for the rest of the way back. Total drive time of 11 hours back. So we had 2 long days, part of why this show is running late. But those are the adventures in my life. A lot of things going on, like I said. And of course, we have coming up Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday season. And hopefully you are safe and stay the fuck away from me and from everybody else so that you don't catch anything and you don't spread anything. But just recently in the news, 2 different pharmaceutical companies have announced that not only they have a theoretically viable vaccination, but apparently in the current level of testing, it seems to have worked. So fingers crossed that that's the case, but keep in mind that probably end of the year or January is the first opportunity that anyone will get vaccinated. And rightfully so, the vaccinations will first go to medical personnel, people that are exposed to being possibly infected every day, and then maybe some high-risk individuals, elderly individuals, people that are in nursing homes or confined spaces or have medical complications. So if you're just your averaged, middle-aged listener to this podcast, you probably aren't going to have a chance of getting this vaccine until May or June or later of next year. So let's all do our best. Be careful out there, people, and protect each other. And that was way even more than I expected to do in this opening segment. So hopefully that's enough. And like I said, the formal segment is on tactical funds and back-tested data. And then we have our interview. Oh, one last thing. I almost forgot. I keep forgetting this. The Secular Student Alliance. I am still in the process of doing a match for them. The website is secularstudents.org/Phil, and you can go there and donate money. If you follow that link, and what I'm asking you to do is to not contribute $100, but contribute something like $5 or $10 a month. It really helps out a charity to have regular recurring income coming in every month. It's much easier for them to plan their budget and to do that. Right now, they've brought in about $7,000 from this promotion at that link. We have 6 weeks left. I really do want it to get to $10,000 because if it gets to $10,000, I will match the entire $10,000. And so the Secular Student Alliance will get $20,000 from listeners of the show and from Phil from Polaris Financial Planning, $20,000 to help its mission of providing service and community and opportunity for college students, which may be more necessary than ever during these times of COVID, where students can know that while they're at university or in a few cases high school, they are not alone. They have a place to go. They have people they can meet. They have people they can share their experiences with. And in some places, this is desperately needed. So I encourage you to go to secularstudents.org/Phil and contribute what you can. If we can get that to $10,000 by the 12/31 of 2020, I will match all $10,000. If it's more than $10,000, great. I'm still only going to match $10,000, by the way. So we've got that going on. I'm going to take a quick break and get on with more of the meat and potatoes of the show. This Investing Skeptically segment is on tactical investing and the idea of back-tested data. And I'm going to give you a couple of previous episode numbers if you really want to dig into this. It's been a while since I've talked about it. Sorry. Show 240 does cover tactical bonds. And I know I talked about tactical way back in 177. That was back in 16. And my notes are for shit, and I'm looking through them here. And I don't know that I've covered tactical for several years, but I have done very comprehensive breakdowns before. Oh, and the other one is back tested. Back testing data, show number 123 and 185. So there's two shows on both of these topics. So tactical investing is basically the idea if I can come up with a script, a program, a routine, a process, whatever, I can outperform. And it can literally be anything to be tactical investing. It can be someone that says, I sell everything on Thursday and buy everything back on Friday. It can be, I only buy things on days of the week that start with a T. It can literally be any rule. And they create a list of rules of when to buy and sell certain things. And a tactical fund may have the ability to do almost literally anything. And it could have short-term bonds today. It could then go to stocks. They could then short stocks. It could put it all in 4 or 5 stocks. It can go to emerging markets. It just depends on whatever is in the prospectus. And of course, we're assuming they are going to follow the rules in the prospectus. So that's the first thing that really worries me. And once they've created this little program, what they then do is they back test it. And so they have all this historical data and they run the program through the historical data for 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years of data to see what would have happened if they used these rules 20 years ago or 10 years ago. The thing is, they didn't. It's not what they actually did. And so sometimes they'll give you a portfolio or a pamphlet that shows you this pretty graph and shows how much they coulda, woulda, shoulda, oughta made if they had done this X number of years ago. And so one of the things that you need to do is if someone suggests you buy a specific product, in this case, an ETF, then you need to go check to figure out what it is that you're actually buying. And did the data they show you, the pretty graph and the glossy pamphlet, what does that really represent? What really are they telling you there? Are they telling you their dreams and hopes and fantasies? And often tactical investing is that. And so this company that I had a little bit of a connection with and the possibility of using 5-6 years ago is called Tuttle Tactical Management. And I don't mean to pick on them specifically. I could pick almost any tactical management company and find the similar thing. And they had all these different funds that they wanted people to sell, including me. And I couldn't get straight answers. It took me several long phone calls for them to admit that the historical data they were showing was fictional. That's my word, not theirs, because they'll say it's back-tested data. It's not back-tested data. You created a set of rules and ran it through a bunch of old data, and these are the results you would have had if you would have done this, but you didn't do that. And the funny thing is, even if it's 5 rules, if they run through the data 10 years in the past and the result is shitty, well, they change one of the rules and they run it again, and the result is shitty. And they change the rules and they run it again. And eventually you get something that looks like it worked on the historical data. And that's cool and all, but you have no way of knowing if it's going to work in the future. And matter of fact, we do have a way of knowing that it's probably not going to work in the future because things change. And so it just kind of popped in my head that I haven't talked about this company clearly, based on my pathetic notes about the podcasts, in several years. And I was like, I wonder how they're doing, because now their funds, instead of being 1 or 2 years old, will be 6, 7, 8 years old. So I went to their website and they have 6 different funds, and I don't remember any of these names. And I pulled them up. They're all fucking brand new. The oldest one I could find, and we're going to talk about it in specific here for a minute, is a year and a half old. So this brings up a thing that people who academically study investments, study mutual funds, study things, and this is often talked in the 4th of the 4 books that I recommend, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, is a thing called survivorship bias. And here is a glorious example of survivorship bias. This organization had a handful, half a dozen funds 5, 6 years ago. Where'd they go? What the fuck happened to them? I mean, really, seriously, I'm fucking asking, where did they go? And I can tell you one thing. If a fund that started in 2014 was kicking ass, and now it's 2020, they would want to show you that they have 6 years of actual data kicking ass. Well, they don't have that. So I don't know what the symbols were for those old funds, but one could do research. Maybe the internet can find it, but they would keep them alive. And so what will happen is often a company that is a little more creative, let's say, if they have a fund that's just horrible, what they'll do is they create a new fund that basically does the same thing, and then they roll all the investors from the old fund into the new fund. And now when you look at their website, you see all the new funds. And so the company has absolute control over what you see. So if you want to go look at all the funds that they have, you can look at all the funds they have today, but you can't look at anything that is already been killed. So they will kill the funds that are underperforming. So why has this company been around for 6, 7 years, and every single fund they have now, the only one I could find that's almost 2 years old, just one of them. And so this is called the Tactical Income Fund, which of course now also, God, there's so much in this little segment. Maybe it's not going to be so little. It is now a super shitty fund. Let me explain why. First of all, it's a bond fund, which, okay, I don't have a problem with a bond fund. I like bond index funds, not bond managed funds. But anytime you have a tactical fund, the idea, they are convinced that they can beat the system. They can beat the game. They can beat the market. That's why they do this. That's the goal. Now, someone might have a thing where they claim they want to get 80% of the market with half the volatility. Okay, that could be a different goal. But usually they want to beat whatever market or whatever index that they're paired to, whatever is relevantly close in an index, whatever. So it's different types of bond funds. And this fund, let's see here. First of all, it has an expense ratio of 2.23%. Really safe conservative bonds right now, you might get 1%. So if you get a bond fund that's safe and conservative and then pay 2.23%, you're negative before you even get going. You might as well put it in a goddamn CD. So that's the first thing. So they have to do something more creative. They have to do something crazy aggressive. Their current yield is 0.68%, which would indicate conservative bonds. So how is that ever going to work out? The year to date, actually, since its launch, let's see, does it have this date? I don't know the exact date, but somewhere back in 2019 until now, if you put $10,000 in, you would now have 9,642. So a loss of 3.5%. The index they're comparing themselves to has made 16%. Okay, well, that's pretty sucky. If you lose 3.5% and the market goes up almost 17%, God, they're going to have to create a new bond fund and kill this one to roll it over into it, because the performance is ghastly. And then I'm looking at Morningstar.com, and I'm going to look and see here. It has, this is one of the things. Currently, or as of September 30th, Morningstar says it has 14% in U.S. stocks, 8% in non-U.S. stocks, and so far this year, in the late November, the market's up, give or take 10, and it went up 30 last year. So that part has nothing to do with bonds, but should have really produced a cranking result. And then 72% is in bonds, 5% is in cash, which is a little higher than I'd like, but okay, and the weighting of the stocks, they're large cap. Okay, so let's look at the bonds here. We're doing this in real time, sorry. Effective duration of the bonds is 1.84, which means they're very short-term bonds, and the average credit rating is AAA, which is nice. So when they're buying bonds, they're buying AAA bonds, but they're going to be buying and selling. And does this, it won't have turnover. It's an ETF. And so the ETF here, the price, it's almost on par or at net asset value. So with an ETF, often an ETF can have a lower expense ratio and be more tax efficient than a managed fund. But if that managed fund is an index fund, and if that managed index fund or non-managed index fund is at Vanguard, the ETF is virtually the exact same. So there's really no tax savings because you are already investing in a way that's very tax efficient. But this fund probably has turnover, that's pretty high. They're buying and selling things. So that's going to add additional drag, additional tax responsibilities, and costs above the published expense ratio of 2.23%. So basically what this is 75% super conservative U.S. bonds and then 25% stocks. And over the last 2 years, where both of those categories are up, they've lost money. Well, that sucks. You would have been better off with the money sitting in your bank or under your mattress because it would not have gone down. So this is an example. Let's see. They also have, let's see here. What do they call this? Trend aggregation. I want to get one. Aggregation. Aggressive growth. Ooh, that sounds sultry. Let's see here. That symbol is TAAG. We're going to do this in real time, folks. We're going to look this up, this tactical fund. And since it's marked as aggressive, and by the way, when you look at different mutual funds and you see words like aggressive growth, moderate growth, mild growth, mixed growth, growth in income, those words are marketing. There's absolutely nothing in those words that's regulated in any way. You could buy all AAA rated U.S. government bonds and call it a mega aggressive growth fund. You could call it a large cap growth fund. You could call it international stock fund. So there's no regulations on that I'm aware of. If somebody knows, let me know. So this is aggressive growth, which probably means it's going to be stocks. We're going to find out. Expense ratio 1.87. Oh, and this is nice. Total assets under management right now, 7.9 million. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's a fraction of the size of the money I manage. This is comically small as far as a mutual fund or an ETF. And one of the things that I kind of just threw out there a moment ago, the net asset value, that's the daily calculation of what each share of this ETF is worth. If the shit really hits the fan and the value drops, if there are people who want to get out, they have to find someone to buy it. And if you have more sellers than buyers, not only could you lose money because the fund lost money, but you could lose money because you can't sell your shares at the price that they're actually worth, because people think that it's going to be even worse than it is. So if the net asset value is $28, you might only be able to sell it for 27 or 25. Not the case yet on this thing. Its performance, let's take a look at that. It is not even a year. It opened this year. They don't even have the year-to-date number, because when did this? As of November 10th? No, that's when I'm doing the recording. I'm so sorry. So it's been around 3 months, a little bit over 3 months. An investment in this fund of $10,000, you would have 11,436. In the index, you would have 12,561. So in just a few months, they're already lagging quite a bit behind. And so let's see what the portfolio is. And again, you can do this with any fund, even things that you already own, in Morningstar.com, just their basic format here. 72% of the money is in stocks. And since March, and this fund has not been open that long, that they've made money because the market's gone up, but they've lagged terribly compared to the S&P 500 or the total stock market index. 72% in stocks, 4% in non-U.S. stocks, and 22% in bonds. So this is called aggressive growth. And they have 22% of their money in bonds. Wow, that seems really weird. Let's see what type of bonds they have. Oh, wait, I got stock style. Because it's primarily stocks, I don't have that information handy. Let's see if that's down here. I don't know. Sorry. They could be using really conservative bonds or really risky bonds. I don't know. But this is an aggressive growth fund, kind of in the ballpark of the S&P 500 or the large cap growth fund, index fund at Vanguard. But it's making a fraction of the returns. And of course, the whole idea with the tactical fund is that they've come up with a system to beat the system. And the very fact that they've destroyed, closed, killed all of their old funds, and they have all these new funds, and even the new funds in just months are lagging behind. And that's probably a large part to do with the fact that they're doing stupid shit. 2.23% expense ratio on a bond fund? Are you fucking kidding me? You're never going to make money on that. I mean, and how do they not know that? Or maybe they do know that. It doesn't matter if they know it. It just matters if they can get investors, and they can convince investors that they have the secret sauce, that they have a way to beat the system. And clearly, just from the performance of this, they can't beat the system. So things for you to look out for is anytime that someone uses the word tactical. And you can go look at your statement. And if one of the investments you have are tactical, you might want to question, why do you have that? If you bought it, why did you buy it? Do you want to keep it? If someone recommended it to you, do they even understand what they recommended and why did they recommend it? You may not want that in your portfolio, whether it's a tactical stock or a tactical bond fund. Again, we have to remember survivorship bias. If a company has been around a long time, but almost all their funds are only a couple years old, why is that? One possibility is that all the old funds have died or been killed or been rolled over into a brand new fund. And so when you look at their funds, you might find that 80 or 90% of their funds are 4 and 5 star funds. And of course, that is meaningless. The Morningstar star rating system, another episode for that, it's meaningless, but people like it. But where are the old funds? Where are the ones that have been around 10, 15 years? And if the company's brand new, why do you want to? I don't know. It's just one of those things. I often say that in the story of the tortoise and the hare, I am the turtle. I am the tortoise. I use really boring shit. I use stock index funds. I use bond index funds. Maybe a couple other things here and there over the years, but really boring, not trying to beat the market, just trying to match the market. And it turns out that you're going to beat most other people with a lot less effort, a lot less anxiety. And, I did the Polaris plan in 6 different shows. I don't even know what show number this is going to go into, but the Polaris plan was detailed in 351 through 356. And you can hear all the different categories and segments and why I do this and why I do that. It's all broken down there. Or you could try this where, they're going to convince you. I do see on their website, they now have a variable insurance trust, the Rational Trend Aggregation Variable Annuity Fund. Yeah, right. That's going to suck. Okay, so that's enough with tactical investing. Bad, back-tested data, completely worthless. Matter of fact, it's worse than worthless because it might convince you that it has value and that you should put your money there. So that makes it worse than not having the information if you don't understand what you're looking at. You don't want to buy 2% expense ratio funds. You're going to lose 2% every year on top of whatever kind of stupid shit they're doing inside of the fund to take your money. So that wraps up tactical and historical backtesting data.
The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. Our contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There's a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation as if a distant memory of falling from a great height. We know we are approaching the grandest of mysteries. The size and age of the cosmos are beyond ordinary human understanding. Lost somewhere between immensity and eternity is our tiny planetary home, the Earth. For the first time, we have the power to decide the fate of our planet and ourselves. This is a time of great danger, but our species is young and curious and brave. It shows much promise. In the last few millennia, we have made the most astonishing and unexpected discoveries about the cosmos and our place within it. I believe our future depends powerfully on how well we understand this cosmos in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky.
We wish to pursue the truth no matter where it leads. But to find the truth, we need imagination and skepticism both. We will not be afraid to speculate, but we will be careful to distinguish speculation from fact. The cosmos is full beyond measure of elegant truths, of exquisite interrelationships, of the awesome machinery of nature.
The surface of the Earth is the shore of the cosmic ocean. On this shore, we've learned most of what we know. Recently, we've waded a little way out, maybe ankle deep, and the water seems inviting. Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return. And we can't, because the cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody, welcome back. I have coming up next an interview with a financial journalist. She has written for Barron's, the Wall Street Journal, the Moscow Times, New York Times, The Street, and of course, we're going to talk about one of her recent articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer. She has written a couple of books, only one of which I had read to me via Audible. I should get paid by them. Too Good to Be True, The Rise and Fall of Bernie Madoff. And she also has another one on Madoff, the man who stole $65 billion. And the book I didn't read, but I think I may have to go get it after the interview, Open Secret, The Global Banking Conspiracy That Swindled Investors Out of Billions. And it's all about LIBOR rates, which maybe many of you know about, but we'll talk about that another time. But she has recently penned an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer on how a financial advisor is having trouble with the SEC there. And my guest is Erin Arvedlund. Arvedlund. I did that practice, see, and I still messed it up. Erin, if I can call you Erin, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Is there anything in general that you'd like to cover before we start getting into the fun stuff?
No, I'm looking forward to talking about personal finance and investing.
Excellent, excellent. Of course, as I warned you in advance, you are free to roam. And so if there's some topic that you think listeners should know about in the investment world or in politics, feel free to go wherever you want. And if I think we're going too far astray, I'll yank you back in. But this new article in the Philadelphia Inquirer is from the 15th of November. How financial advisor Dean, and you said he goes by Vagnozzi, built his brand and drew the interest of the SEC. So tell us about Dean and how he got started, or where is he now?
So Dean Vagnozzi started out with a company called A Better Financial Plan, largely selling life insurance. He was licensed in the state of Pennsylvania and drew quite a few investors into his next round of funds through free meal seminars. And for those of you who maybe have clients or parents or elderly relatives who attend these, I find it's often good advice to either go with them, make sure that the sales pitch is legitimate, because sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. So that's kind of how Dean got started. He was, I would say, a fairly small operation until he started selling private placements and unregistered securities, which all of which is just stuff that doesn't need to be registered with the SEC. And that's when he began to really start making money.
And it's funny because the idea that stuff doesn't need to be registered with the SEC, for some people, I guess might be a sales point. For me, it's a point of near panic. Because if it doesn't need to be registered, it's like, if I went to the pharmacy and they said, this is not approved by the FDA, but it's going to make you better. Why isn't it approved? And he was doing a while back, and maybe he still sells them. It was in your article, life insurance. People would buy out life insurance. Do I have it correct that the right word for that would be viaticals? Is that what those are?
Actually, that was the next step for Mr. Vagnozzi. He started selling, those are essentially life insurance policies that investors buy from the elderly at a discount. And then once those former policyholders pass away, then the investors reap the dividends of the policy. So those are called life settlements or viaticals.
Now, I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So someone has probably been diagnosed with something, because you don't want to buy a life settlement if the person's going to live 20 more years. And so they would buy this life insurance policy, and the new owner of the life insurance policy must continue to make the premium payments. And maybe it's $1 million life insurance policy that you pay $700,000 for, you make the premiums for a couple of years, and then you get $1 million when they die. And people, well, I know I do, I think of this as kind of creepy. But if that person could really benefit from the funds of their life insurance being bought out in advance, I'm not philosophically opposed to it, but often it runs afoul, but did he do a good job with this, or were there problems with that as well?
No, he actually was doing a pretty brisk business in that. So selling life insurance, then also creating, basically he would hold these seminars, ask people to pool their money and invest in these funds, life settlement funds, some real estate, and was billing himself on the radio and in television ads as a quote alternative to the stock market, and that was true to some degree, because it wasn't stocks, it wasn't bonds. These were funds that were either all private placements, or he brought in investors from some of the seminars or from advertising, and was promising about 10% returns.
Wow. It's funny. I think in just a minute or two, you hit 4 buzzwords that concern me, and I often tell advisors to be worried about it. One is private placement. That's problematic. You really need to know exactly what you're doing, and I find so often people don't. Let's see. You said 10 to 12% returns, and I know he's talked about in his advertising with very low risk, which doesn't make any sense at all. And of course, free food, free dinners. These are all the kinds of alternative investments. There's another phrase that scares the shit out of me. I'm very very boring. I tell people I'm the tortoise in the Tortoise and the Hare story. Really simple, basic stuff. Alternative investments spook me. What do you think of the concept of alternative investments? And then tell us about what he got into with par funding.
Oh, sure. So alternatives could be anything, and my understanding is they could be anything ranging from precious metals to real estate to fine art, antiques, anything that is not public equities. More recently, I think a lot of pension funds, like state pension funds, endowments, universities, they are investing in alternatives through private equity funds, which are just essentially, instead of buying public stocks or public companies, they buy them before they go public.
Or after they're no longer public in some cases.
All right. So some of the names that you might read about in the Wall Street Journal who do private equity are like Carlyle or Apollo or KKR. So that was the idea. I think that Mr. Bagnozzi had. His phrase was, quote, invest like the big boys.
Right.
And the idea was that retail investors could copy this idea through his funds. And then around 2017, he partnered with a guy by the name of Joseph Lafort and his team. And Joe Lafort had already been in prison twice. Actually, he was twice convicted.
Good track record.
And good track record, but for whatever reason, and just because someone's been in prison doesn't mean that they can't have a successful business career.
Absolutely.
Lafort and Bagnozzi teamed up to sell par fundings vehicles. Now, what par did was they lent money to very small businesses. It's something called a merchant cash advance business. So essentially, you or I can't get a bank loan, so we go to one of these alternative lenders, and for a much, much higher interest rate, we get a short-term loan. And essentially, you're borrowing against your revenue stream.
It's kind of like payday lending, but for a company?
Correct.
And in your story here, you talked about as much as 50%. That's for a year. I mean, we're talking about the guys are going to show up and break your kneecaps if you don't pay it off kind of lending here. And of course, the idea that someone might pay 50% interest, and okay, maybe they really need the money, but anyone that's willing to pay 50% interest means they can't get a 10% loan from a bank. So there's a possibility that there's a default chance here, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes. So the outcome at first was actually really good because, as you probably know, after the financial crisis of 2008, banks, by and large, stopped lending to mom and pop businesses, and these merchant cash advance companies stepped into the breach. They aren't all bad actors. Some of them are names that you might recognize, like Amazon and Shopify, Intuit, through QuickBooks. These are major companies, public companies, and they lend money to people who sell on their platforms. Now, they're not charging them usurious interest rates, but it's a huge business. Then along comes Par Funding, and they had a different model completely, which was they would lend money at extremely high interest rates, which, in some states is legal, and push the company quickly into default by filing a lawsuit, thereby collecting even larger fees.
Well, I want to make sure I understood that correctly. So Par Funding would lend this money to a small business, and when the small business had any trouble paying back the money, they would now go after the small business to try to get a settlement to take it over. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Wow.
No, they actually didn't want to take over the company. All they wanted to do, it's kind of like, when your student loan goes into default, all of a sudden you're paying all these extra fees to get current.
I see.
And that's what Par Funding was doing. But they were doing it to the tune of thousands of lawsuits because it actually paid more for them to push those little companies into default and charge them extra fees.
I see. So 50% interest wasn't enough. They wanted to spend money on attorneys to make even more money. That's staggering. So it's one of those things that whenever I hear about a business that makes money by crushing other businesses, destroying economic activity, it really bothers me because it's kind of a perverse opportunity to ruin the economy while making money for yourself. Does that seem to fit in this category?
Well, that's what the SEC and the FBI have alleged. So earlier this year, as we all know, the economy really got slammed by the coronavirus, and many of these small companies actually did start defaulting, but Par didn't actually disclose that in a timely fashion, and neither did Dean Vagnozzi. All of a sudden, the funds that he had sold linked to Par Funding and some of the other vehicles couldn't make their payments, and that's kind of how things fell apart.
Wow. And of course, if people really want to dig into this, again, this is from a story in the Philadelphia Inquirer, how financial advisor Dean Vagnozzi built his brand. And there's also a 15-minute video clip, I think, from a private investigator, which was interesting. A little hard to hear, of course, just because of the serendipitous? No, whatever. The secretive, trying to get too fancy for myself, secretive way it was recorded. And where are things now with this quote-unquote financial advisor? Or not financial advisor, because he's not registered.
Yeah, Dean Vagnozzi was not registered as an investment advisor with the SEC. He had been registered as with FINRA as a broker from some years back, but let that lapse because he was selling strictly insurance
Right.
products, and then private placements. So it turned out that the SEC had been looking at him and his business practices since 2018. We didn't know about this until Par Funding collapsed and his arrangement with Par came to light. So what we're finding out now is that the SEC asked that he disentangle himself from Par Funding. They froze all his assets, and his business has been taken over by a receiver.
Wow. Now you said disentangled with Par, and this is one of the things I thought I read in the article, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Was he a part owner of Par Funding?
No, but he and Par had set up some commingled investment funds. So it's complex, and it was meant to be. But essentially, he would go back to his investor audience and say, "Hey, I have this great new fund. It's going to be half, my investments in viaticals or real estate or whatever, and it's going to be half Par Funding." It's an awful mess, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and often these things get complicated. And I do want to get to the book before you run out of your precious time. What else should we know about Dean and his current situation?
He's not been charged criminally. It's only civil cases. And he's vigorously defending himself in court, has claimed his innocence, has defended himself by saying he never stole or mishandled any investor funds, and that is true. But what's happening right now is the SEC and the receiver are trying to sort out his other assets, his investors' assets, from Par Funding, because Par Funding's principals, like Jill Lafort, are under criminal investigation. So Dean claims that he did due diligence on his business partners, but it certainly seems like it wasn't sufficient.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that he keeps trying creative new ways, which maybe for some becomes a door into a new style of investing, but it often is just a smoky room so people can get away with doing something they shouldn't be doing. And like you said, he's not accused of fraud, he's not convicted of fraud, so maybe he's totally straight up and just got confused, maybe wasn't diligent, as we're talking about. But we'll see, I guess. But the end thing for my listeners is that if someone is promising you 10% returns when really safe conservative U.S. government bonds are paying 1%, it should jump into your head that why am I getting 10%? And what are the risks involved? And they better be pretty significant risks if someone's willing to give you 10% for your money. Does that seem fair?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with looking into returns that may sound good to be too good to be true, because maybe they are high risk and maybe you can tolerate that. But for older people, with people who are looking to retire soon, sounds way too risky.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we transfer over to Bernie, he was doing these dinners, and he's very specifically and adamantly in your writing insisted to you that these aren't sales pitches. Is he technically correct by definition and legal foundation, but in spirit not correct? What is your take on that?
The SEC disagrees. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good person to be in disagreement with.
They argued that it is a general solicitation. Dean said it was not, and I guess they'll duke it out in court.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I had once had a friend who was in a business similar to mine and would have seminars and dinners, and he would have everybody come in and sign a document saying that they understand this is not a solicitation, but on the table right next to the document that they signed was a pamphlet which was the formal solicitation, but he never gave anyone that pamphlet. They just picked it up on their own, and I was like, I don't know.
Okay.
So there's following the rules, and then there's intent, and I don't know. So let's talk about Bernie, if we may. And again, the book is Too Good to Be True, which I slammed down at 200% speed yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I knew, but I was fascinated by some of the stuff that I don't think any of the other books or movies I've watched focused on. So thank you for that. I did not know that Bernie Madoff was a leader in the development of computer trading, and clearly a fucking genius. And one of the points of your book was that he was going to succeed and be super rich. He didn't even need to cheat people.
No, no, he didn't.
Tell us about what the good things that he did for the system, and I just, it blows my mind because I can't help but wonder, was it not enough? What was the motivation? But before we get into possible theories of motivation, tell us about his early years and the computer technology and stuff that he helped develop.
Bernie and his brother, Peter Madoff, were a fairly small trading outfit on Wall Street. They did a lot of over-the-counter trading. And so they had an incentive to kind of speed things up when computer technology came along. And they helped found the NASDAQ, the early NASDAQ, which was National Association of Securities Dealers, and it was an automated quotation system. So rather than, standing on a trading floor and controlling everything in person, they wanted to embrace this new technology of sending quotes around nationally on a computer. And, of course, the New York Stock Exchange and the American Stock Exchange resisted. They thought it was a terrible idea.
Of course they did. And they were right.
Because, of course, it was threatening their monopoly.
Right.
Or duopoly, rather.
Yeah.
And that was the forerunner to today's NASDAQ. Now, as a result of that, Madoff Securities began attracting a lot of order flow, buys and sells, and they grew tremendously. They grew also due to something called payment for order flow.
Right.
Which was, they were early adopters of paying large banks and other institutions, pennies on the dollar to send orders their way. And at the time, it was considered blasphemy on Wall Street to do that. And guess what? Everyone does it now, including Robinhood. So they essentially pioneered two huge innovations on the street. And yes, that was the big surprise for me too, was that Madoff didn't really need to be running this secret hedge fund on the side. He was doing very well. By the 1980s, I think he was doing like 10% of all the volume on the New York Stock Exchange. But he had started this fund so far back that I think he just decided, well, I can't get out of it.
Wow. And one of the things that often people don't understand, and if you feel comfortable explaining it in a little detail, people will ask me, how does, by the way, my business, Polaris Financial Planning, utilizes TD Ameritrade as the qualified custodian for my clients. Full disclosure for everybody. How does somebody like TD Ameritrade or Fidelity or any other big broker dealer make money on trades? And I'm thinking specifically, not about the $5 fee, but the spread. What is that, and how does that work?
Oh man, You probably know the answer to that better than me.
I don't know. I read some of your work. You know a lot of things.
Well, let's see. They make it partly because they're paying for certain orders. So, let's say you and I send in our order, and they are then taking that information and essentially, I don't want to say front running, but they're essentially using that almost like an early algorithm where they can see the trends in purchases and sales. And also, they're required to disclose payment for order flow and claim that they're getting the best price execution for their clients. But a lot of people don't know that, they might not be getting it 100% of the time.
Well, and one of the things it used to be that stocks were quoted in dollars and fractions of dollars, like 20 and 1/2 or 20 and 1/4 or 20 and 3/8, and often the broker dealer, while they're engaged in this process, would buy and sell at different prices and clear 12.5 cents or 25 cents per share. And so if you're selling a lot of shares, you can make real money. And it is also a surprise. And even when I was listening to the book, it reminded me how recently we went to a decimal system. When was that implemented?
Oh, decimalization happened in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and it seems like, I'm sure some of my younger investors never knew there was another way.
Right, or online trading.
Yeah, exactly. Or real-time trading where, sometimes if someone asks me to put in an order, I put it in, and when I go to check to see that I put it in correctly, it's already done because it takes fractions of a second. And when they went from fractional prices to decimal prices, the spread amount that broker-dealers, including Bernie Madoff, could make dropped precipitously, and a lot of people went out of business. How did it affect his business?
Bernie suffered just like everyone else because if you're making less money, even if you're doing higher volume, you can't make it up. So he started sending kind of sloshing money back and forth between his brokerage business, which is now losing money, and his phony hedge fund. So it wasn't a cash and prizes business like it had been.
Right.
And he experienced the same pinch.
And the funny thing was about his quote unquote hedge fund, as you clearly articulated it in the book, not even a hedge fund because it wasn't registered as a hedge fund. Not that that would make it any better.
No, he actually never bought a single stock.
Never even tried, huh?
Never even tried. That was the biggest surprise to me was that he essentially built up a fund of $60+ billion, or what he said was, including all the phony profits. And he would send out fake statements to his clients every month, showing purchases of, this index and the sale of that stock and buying Apple and selling IBM. And never made a single trade.
And this is one of the reasons why I tell my clients it's very important to make sure that your advisor is not your custodian. And I also like the fact that, the investments are not even held by the custodian. I'm not investing in TD Ameritrade funds. I'm using Vanguard funds. So there's all those different checkpoints where you can verify from a third party that you have what you have.
Sure.
Where people were just like showing up to Bernie Madoff with $100 million and saying, here, and would hand him a check for $100 million. And
well, in some cases, people did write him a check directly, and you're never supposed to do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Any sort of finance person.
Yeah, I tell people it's the first rule of Polaris Club: never give Phil money. Because
that's good advice.
Yeah, Thank you. So yeah, he was doing this, and in the early days, he was promising crazy returns, like 20%.
Well, actually, that might not have been so hard to achieve back in the 60s.
Okay.
Because he was trading small over-the-counter companies, and the profit margins were much wider. But over time, with the quote-unquote phony hedge fund, he said he could guarantee 10 or 11% a year.
And what do you think?
Whether the market was up or down.
What do you think as a financial, financial author, financial writer, if someone comes to you and says, I can guarantee you 10% return and there's no risk, what does your mind tell you?
Red flags all over the place.
Okay.
Because you and I know that the stock market has historically returned anywhere from 5 to 7% a year, and the bond market a little less.
Right, and that 5% to 7%, you're saying that's after adjusting for inflation.
Correct.
Okay.
Real returns after inflation.
Fair enough.
So if someone says they can beat that with no risk, that just my antenna go up.
And I always wondered about Bernie. It was one of those things that in your book, it's clear, and in some of the other books and movies that I've seen about it, there were so many people that were on him and knew that something was wrong because his returns were too consistent. If he had just had a couple of years where he only paid 3% or minus 2 and then back to 15, but his returns were as consistent as the Chinese government reports economic progress numbers. Every month he would make 1%, 1%, 1%, and there's no way to do that. And people were on to him just because his numbers were too good, too consistent, not necessarily just because they were too good, but too consistent. And any thoughts on that or any other stuff about Bernie and his quote unquote hedge fund?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he would report down months, but never a down year.
Ah, okay.
And, when you have that kind of low volatility, that attracts big money. Sometimes people get greedy, and now when I'm talking about greed, I guess I'm referring to folks like Ezra Merkin and Walter Noel and some of the other people who ran these feeder funds, and they were sending hundreds of millions of dollars Bernie's way. They had the ability and the the resources to figure out that he wasn't doing what he said, but they chose to be willfully ignorant.
Yes.
Whereas the retail investor was relying on the SEC to do that check for them, and they didn't do such a great job.
And it's also an amazing thing. I guess I didn't know it was quite as global of a thing. And he had people recommending him, and everyone was an exception because he wasn't taking clients, but everyone was an exception and allowed in, which made him special. And he often said no, and then they said please, and he said no. But I was surprised how many people he was paying off. And like you're talking about, they're being willfully ignorant, because a sophisticated person sending money to Bernie Madoff probably should have figured out just on their own, something's not right here. I may not know how he's doing it, but it can't be done. But yet they continued to sell and recommend Bernie Madoff because he was paying them in literally millions, hundreds of millions, and maybe even billions of dollars of money going to people that keep referring money to Bernie Madoff. And this became a global thing. Maybe even people in Russia, Arab princes kind of things. How big did this become globally?
Definitely, he was able to secure quite a few investors out of Europe, like Bank Austria. Sonia Cohen was running their asset management business, and she invested hundreds of millions with Bernie. some royals, some institutional investors. He hadn't quite made it to China. The Asian tigers and all of those, newly wealthy people.
Right.
But it was definitely on his list.
Wow. Now, when this whole thing blew up, of course, he just admitted to the whole thing. And after telling his family, people that invested with him, what percentage of their money did they eventually get back?
The recovery rate was actually pretty high. Although they did not get back, the amount that they thought they had. So they got back about 75 cents on the dollar of their principal, not of the fake profits.
Wow, that's actually better than I thought. And the funny thing is, if he had just put all of that money, or a big portion of it, in the total stock market index, he could have paid everybody back.
Oh, for sure. Or he could have actually made a lot more money.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing with his business and his investment skills, because he apparently, from time to time, was able to call really material changes in the investment world and be in the right place at the right time. It just staggers the mind that this became a thing, and it probably became a beast that he couldn't control and just had to keep lunging forward, otherwise you'd fall down.
That was what Harry Markopolos, who was a whistleblower to the SEC, that was his theory, was that Bernie had gotten so big that he had to, in order to keep it going, he just had to keep raising more and more money. And Harry figured it out because he had been traveling around to visit all the same bankers, in Switzerland and London, and he would walk in and make his pitch, and they would say, "Thank you very much, but we already invested with Bernie. He has the same strategy, but he's making much, much bigger profits." So that's what prompted Markopolos to start looking at Madoff's fund and determine that it was a fraud.
Absolutely. So again, Erin Arvedlund, and of course the book we were talking about is Too Good to Be True, The Rise and Fall of Bernie Madoff, available at all good booksellers. I want to be respectful of your time, so if you need to go, we can wrap up. But of course, I see just even in the Philadelphia Inquirer, you have recent articles about taxes, elections, vaccinations, any of that stuff you want to talk about since you have this opportunity.
There's so much going on right now that, basically we're all waiting on Georgia to see what happens with the Senate races there. If the Republicans can hold on to those seats, I think there will very likely be a few changes to the tax code.
Yeah. So. Do you have any thoughts on level taxes or progressive taxes?
I don't. All I do is I talk to smarter people than myself and try and figure out the U.S. tax code, which, as you know, stumped even Albert Einstein. So.
Fair enough. Well, Erin, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being on the Phil Ferguson Show, and did quite enjoy the book, so thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Jesus says that he speaks in parables because the people, they just don't understand anything else. But the parables are often foggy and meaningless, and Jesus is snippy when even the disciples don't get them. He says to them, if you don't understand this parable, then how can you understand any parable? And are you incapable of understanding? I kept thinking, don't teach in parables then. It's not working. Even your staff doesn't understand them. Why don't you just say what you mean? Okay, so Jesus isn't so patient, and I think he picked a very ineffective lesson-giving technique, and he's angry most of the time, but that doesn't make him bad. It's just, wow, I really expected someone else. Some of the parables are not just foggy. To me, they're sort of offensive. Like in Luke, Jesus helps us understand God's relationship with humans by telling us a story about how God treats people the way people treat their slaves. They beat some more than they beat others. Okay, I know this was a different time and everything, and I really tried to keep that in mind as the Bible refers to slavery all over the place. And not only does it not say it's wrong, I mean, the Bible gives you advice about how you're supposed to keep your slaves and how slaves should behave obediently at all times to their masters. But I don't know, I guess I sort of thought the Son of God would say slavery was wrong. But no, Jesus does not say that. In fact, he uses slavery as an example of how God treats people. It was really hard to stay on Jesus' side when he started saying really aggressive, just hateful things. Like in Luke chapter 21, Jesus says that he is like a king who says, anyone who does not recognize me, bring them here and slaughter them before me. Or in John chapter 15, Jesus says, anyone who does not believe in me is like a withered branch that will be cast into the fire and burned. In Matthew, he says, I come not to bring peace, but a sword. And in Luke, he says, and if you don't have a sword, sell your clothes and buy one. Then Jesus just starts acting downright crazy. Like in Matthew chapter 21, when this fig tree doesn't have a fig for Jesus to eat, he condemns the fig tree to death. That's right, Jesus condemns a fig tree to death. Not a parable, by the way, just Jesus pissed off that the fig tree didn't have a fig for him to eat when he wanted one. Not exactly the Prince of Peace who taught us to turn the other cheek. And then there's family. I have to say that for me, the most deeply upsetting thing about Jesus is his family values, which is amazing when you think how there's so many groups out there who say they base their family values on the Bible. I mean, he seems to have no real close ties to his parents. He puts his mother off cruelly over and over again. At the wedding feast, he says to her, woman, what have I to do with you? And once, while he was speaking to a crowd, Mary waited patiently off to the side to talk to him, and Jesus said to the disciples, send her away, because you are my family now. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell this exact same story, but Mark actually tells us why Mary was there to see Jesus. He says Mary came to see Jesus to restrain him, because the people were saying he's gone out of his mind. I kept thinking, yes, let's go get Jesus and get him some help.
Thank you again for listening. I greatly appreciate you hanging out with me and having so much fun listening to the show. If you have show topic ideas, whether they're investment or political or religion related, let me know. I don't think I've done in a while a church money episode. So if you happen to, during election time or during any of the upcoming holiday activities, happen to be in a church for whatever reason, no questions asked. You don't have to explain yourself. You can send me a profit and loss statement that you might find on a table in the hallway of the church that you visit. Just sneak a copy into your pocket. They're there for the members, but if you're not a member, you can grab one because who's going to stop you? And then scan it in and send it to me. I will disguise your name and the church as much as you want. Of course, if you want me to be specific, I can talk about that specific church or the specific sect that they are in. We can do that. Questions about investments, how the Polaris plan works, how anything works. If I don't know how it works, I can either investigate it or tell you to fuck off. I guess I don't know. Just it really saves me a lot of time and effort with all of your great ideas, and thank you for so many of them. If you send me an email, I will try my best to respond to it. It is a thing now that I do get so much spammy stuff of people wanting me to sell shit to you that it may get lost, or I just might get busy. And again, it's the holiday season, so I have other things that I need to do and want to do. Apparently, I'm not going to Italy because you can't really travel right now, pandemic, but hopefully in a few years, we'll look back at an episode like this and laugh about how fun it was in the pandemic. But right now, it's kind of a buzzkill. So looking forward to getting out someday. Other things, I haven't looked to see if there's new 5-star recommendations, 5-star ratings. If you have the opportunity, if you like the show, you can go to iTunes or Apple Podcast, I think it is, or Stitcher. Yeah, Stitcher. And you can leave a 5-star review of the show. The more 5-star reviews, the more likely a new listener is going to stumble across the show and go, wow, this guy has 500 5-star reviews. I'm going to check it out. So it helps me, it helps the show. If you'd like to send a token of support via a financial thing, patreon.com/Phil is the easiest way to do that. Of course, that does not mean we have a client advisor relationship. You don't get anything for that money except for the show the day before the average person. So that's the perk. $1 per show is asked. Would be nice, I guess. But a few people have chosen to pay or contribute something higher. The top tier, I think, is still $6.66, just because it fucking cracks me up. So thank you for those people who do that. And the show's already way longer than I wanted it to be, but we had so much good stuff, and it's been 10 days, almost 2 weeks since the last episode. So again, thank you so much for listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. Thank you for your emails. Thank you for telling friends and family members to listen. And I guess that's it. And someday, maybe in 2021, summer 2021, we can meet each other in person, and I look forward to that day. Until then, ciao.
I'm gonna go to church, oh they got 20 minutes to the service. I saved the puppy, gonna tie my money, I'm an awesome Christian.
Yo, walk up to the church like, what up, it's me and H. Diddy. I'm so pumped about Christ, I brought a friend with me. King James in my right, testimony in my left. This ain't no pocket Bible.
Dang, it's bigger than the rest.
Rolling in Christian tea, heading to the meet and greet. Shaking sweaty hands, please re-sanitize me. Smelling so sweet, girls beside hugging me. Shoes be flying off, I'm washing people's feet. Ooh, man. But I'm a servant, baby.
Copping and washing, about to go and get some compliments. Spiritual moccasins, Jesus steps I'll be walking in. I'll be your Boaz, and you be my Ruth. I mean, true love waits, I'm teaching it to you. I lead with Billy Graham style, Not for real, let's hang out, would you like to pray a while? Tailor-made suit, looking nicer than the pastor. Is this revelation feeling flyer than the rapture? You didn't bring your Bible.
You didn't bring your Bible?
It's cool, I brought 6, cause I'm just that reliable.
Hello, my pastor man, my fellow. Is that a Jonas brother?
No.
Witness to some atheists.
Please convert those.
Non-believers be like, is that Tim Tebow?
I'm gonna go to church, oh they got 20 minutes to the service. I saved a puppy, gonna tie my money, I'm an awesome Christian. I'm gonna go to church, oh they got 20 minutes to the service. I saved a puppy, gonna tie my money, I'm an awesome Christian.
What do you know about rocking? Christ's forgiveness. What do you know about wearing the bright gold tie clip? I'm the pastor. I know how to lead the flock. I'm like Tim Tebow. I'm a spiritual jock. Thank your granddad for giving his 10% tithe. Cause right now I'm praying that, well, he's still alive. I rock 40-minute sermons.
No commercials.
I study every week.
With no rehearsals.
I can marry Barry Duncan, drop some serious religious funk. I got the best parking spot in the land, number 2 in command. I'll pull you out of quicksand with my spiritual hand. Cause under this steeple, I'm the man. I have like 5 dying puppies this week. I have a soft side. You don't believe me? Why don't you check out my cufflinks? I don't auto-tune my sermons because I'm already pitch perfect. Like John 3:16. I am worth
Serving Lord's Supper, call me Betty Crocker. When you take the bread, you'll be falling down at the altar. I'm here with my arms wide open. You're a sinking ship at sea, and I'll embrace you like the ocean. Check my notes, this ain't fire and brimstone. Hey, if Jesus ain't calling, turn off your cell phone.
Don't be a hypocrite, believe what you say. Heaven's beating out your chest like Dr. Dre.
Go to church next Sunday. Don't give me an excuse. Eat up your daily bread and drink your Jesus juice.
I'm gonna go to church. Only got 20 minutes till the service. I saved a puppy, gonna tie my money. I'm an awesome Christian.
I'm in a choir robe. I look incredible. I'm on the second row, about to sing my third solo. I'm in a choir robe.
Come on.
I look incredible.
Yes, sir, we out for my spiritual
I'm
shots.
on
Come
the
on.
second row, about to sing my third solo.
I'm gonna go to church. Only got 20 minutes till the service. I saved a puppy, gonna tie my money. I'm an awesome Christian.